Good morning, Anthony. Hey, Anthony. Good morning.
Good morning.
Qu-
How are you?
Fine. Question. Did
Mm-hmm.
you see an agenda for this meeting? I looked for it from Jonathan, but I
Mm-hmm.
didn't. I looked from Colin. I didn't get it.
Yep. Hold
You could send it to me.
on. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Did it what? You not showing? Oh, your out of office is on. Isn't it? No, that can't be you.
My out of office still is supposed to expire this morning. Let me turn it off because I didn't know. Hold on. I did have it on though.
Okay. It's gonna be an interesting meeting because some folks are out. Oh, it's turning off at 10.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of that.
Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning, Reverend Renee. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
You know what? I'm gonna make it if it's the last thing I do.
It's
Y'all,
not
y'all can
that
say
bad,
y'all
is
can say
it?
resting above my coffin that I made it, whatever that
Ah,
means.
okay. Can't be that bad though now.
Oh no, never.
Okay, good.
You might notice that I just sent sort of an email update of, there are several portions of the agenda that I'm responsible for.
Oh, okay.
And I literally just sent an update about it about 10 minutes ago, just to give you and Shantae sort of a heads up of what I'll be discussing. I would normally try to get that out to you guys, of course, much earlier. But in the absence of the infamous Lloyd, I'm having to fill some important shoes. And so thankfully with Colin's support, I'm having a crash course in getting myself up to speed pretty quickly, but um, you know, more to come.
Oh, okay. Fantastic. Well, I'm filling in for Jonathan
Okay.
today.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I have 4 meetings between 10 and 12. So there's no way I can do that. I
Right.
mean, it's crazy. But I have to jump from one thing to the next, and it is absolute. It shouldn't have been this way. I don't know normally structure my time, but
Mm-hmm.
these are things that somebody else gave me.
Oh my goodness.
So I have my training that I do at 11:30, but in between that, we have a town hall, some information that came up, and then another meeting regarding an award. So hopefully I won't have to be on that but 5 minutes. But I appreciate Shanta being on today. So it looks like it's 10 o'clock.
Mm-hmm. Let me see
So,
who's right now. It's just our team and you.
okay.
So we are waiting for Shantae, Tracy, Alicia, and Eliza.
Well, it looks like Eliza's on and
Oh,
Melva's on.
Eliza just got here. Great. Excellent.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Oh, Vega's here. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning. How are
morning.
you? All right.
Okay. Well, we can go ahead and want to welcome you all this morning. And we can call ourselves to order, I believe. We are still waiting for a quorum, I'm sure. So,
Yes, we have about 2 more.
okay. So hope everyone's June is going well. Lovely weather and all of that. Did we have anyone signed up for the public comment period?
No, I didn't see anyone.
Okay, great. Well, we will skip the approval of the minutes until someone else, till we get the quorum. And first up, Anthony, we have you for Housing First evaluation. Did you want to proceed with that while we await the quorum?
Yes, please. Thank you. So most of my things are, good morning, everybody, first of all. Most of my things are informational only. And Jonathan and I had talked last week, and although I provided what we thought was a really good summary of information at the last performance management meeting, um, there are details regarding the Housing First evaluation that the committee is supposed to know that aligns with its responsibilities over the other things we discussed, such as performance improvement plans and things like that. So I wanted to go ahead. Lloyd had already sent this information out in the form of a Word document to Jonathan, and I'm not sure if it went to the whole committee at that time, but he was unable to present the full information. So I wanted to go ahead and provide that information with the appropriate details, and I will do that now. And please stop me at any time if you have questions. So I'm going to share my screen here. Yes. And I'm not sure what you all see. Can you tell me what you see?
We're seeing your PowerPoint presentation.
You're seeing this where my cursor is?
Yes.
Perfect. Excellent. All right. So this first slide is one I did last month. And this presentation, like I said, is more details than the summary I gave last month. But today we're going to just focus on the Housing First side of it. This Housing First evaluation evaluates the implementation of the Housing First approach within our projects. We do this annually, and the components that are scored are housing process and structure, housing services, service philosophy, service array, and team structure and HR, human resources. So in the annual NOFO, HUD requires us to describe the tools and methods used outside of the local competition to evaluate and ensure projects commit to a housing first approach in their implementation. And so this is why we do this evaluation. It is outside of the NOFO process. It also helps us and helps the providers or the organizations to strengthen services and to make sure that when we're doing the collaborative application, that we maximize opportunities to score higher. In terms of our approach, we formed 6 3-person teams with representatives from HSAC who served as review leads, COC membership, and lead agency staff. I had the pleasure of serving along with Alicia and Renee for several project evaluations. So this is related to those processes. Lloyd adapted the tool from Pathways Housing First Fidelity Scale and revised it to assign points to the 5 areas that we talked about earlier that would be scored. That is housing process and structure, housing and services, service philosophy, service array, and team structure and HR. The evaluation team members did 90-minute trainings with our technical assistance advisor, Whitney Patterson. She taught us all about the basic tenets of Housing First policies and practices. And then Lloyd provided an orientation to the tool and timeline for the completion of the evaluations. So that was one long session where Whitney spent about the first hour going over the tenets of housing first, and then Lloyd took over and reviewed the evaluation tool and timeline. And then after we completed the evaluations, we held feedback sessions with the evaluators and providers, separate sessions. So let's talk a little bit about the results. And again, you saw this slide last month as well. We evaluated 9 programs. 5 of them were permanent supportive housing. 4 were rapid rehousing. There was an average score of, I will just say 66 out of 100. One outlier for permanent supportive housing scored at 96%. The remaining projects were between 48 and 72%. The lowest average scores and the most room for improvement dealt with service requirements, support provided by projects, and connections to community services, such as employment, education, and volunteer opportunities. And we have been providing technical assistance to some of these projects to improve outcomes. You might remember the Performance Management Committee is responsible for issuing performance improvement plans. But what we learned during the evaluation process is that organizations may have needed assistance that they weren't necessarily getting because of bandwidth issues and other things related to their work with us. And so the Performance Management Committee, you all decided and we agreed that we would hold off doing any performance improvement plans in the next couple of months, reserve those for maybe the fall when everybody's back in August, and take a moment to review whether or not any progress have been made as a result of the technical assistance that we're providing to the projects. So, the next slide will give some of the details. So, these are the permanent supportive housing projects that we looked at right here. Andover, Dash, Streets to Home 1, Streets to Home 2, and William Square. If you look over at the far, these are all the 5 areas that we scored, and then the total score. And if you look over to the far right, that is the score as a percentage of the maximum. And you can again see where I got the summary numbers from. The average is 66% out of all of those projects, with one outlier sort of raising that average score pretty well because they score at 96%. Do we have any questions about this particular slide or anything I've gotten to this point? Perfect. All right. So that's the permanent supportive housing projects. There were 5 that we looked at. When we get to the rapid rehousing side, let me see something. Okay, when we get to the rapid rehousing side, I think I might have an error here in the average because I might have copied it from the last one, so I may have to fix that. But we can see the 4 rapid rehousing projects. Those are Housing for New Hopes, RRH, UMD Fresh Start, the LGBTQ Center, and Families Moving Forward. And we can see that the average here is more around 70%, not 66. So I think that's an error on my part that I will fix. Again, the biggest opportunities for improvement were service requirements. So anything that is involving services, how connected formally or informally are providers to services that allow for the clients to participate in wellness activities. It could be anything from AA meetings to any type of therapy connections, to volunteer opportunities, to employment. It runs the gamut, all the services. If people ask for linkages to mental health or substance abuse or any of that, any of those services would help support the wellness of the client and would thus score higher. So let's go down to the feedback sessions. At the end of the evaluation, we conducted 2 virtual feedback sessions. The first was with evaluators and the second was with the organizations that are implementing these projects. Around 10 people participated in each session, and we asked the following questions. What did you learn about this process, about Housing First in this process? What did you learn about your projects or the projects you evaluated? What are some best practices you may have learned in this process? What about this process worked? And what about this process needs to be improved in the future? So the next few slides are going to flesh out each of those questions briefly. So what did you learn about Housing First in this process? Evaluators came to, I think, better understand the importance of using the Housing First approach throughout our system. And also, they came to understand that while all the projects have great intentions, it can be difficult dealing with high barrier clients to serve, to connect them to services and help them achieve housing stability. I don't think that surprises anyone. And the organizations said that they have to always remember not to place their standards for behavior on participants who have experienced trauma or have had much different life experiences than they have. And that is particularly true for high barrier clients. So the way we would be in a normal day thinking about what our floor or our baseline should be for progress, we cannot place those standards onto people who have been traumatized or have more high barrier needs. We'll move to the second question. What did you learn about your projects or those you evaluated? The evaluator said that some projects are good at connecting participants to jobs. Projects often struggle to connect participants to healthcare resources. And the evaluators were more times than not impressed by the organizations they were reviewing, particularly in the areas of professionalism and services. So the organizations felt that documenting some of their practices will make it easier to achieve consistency, that they need to ensure the policies and procedures that they have for the projects and their organizations align with HUD's policies, and that they can do better at articulating how their programs work and to differentiate them for people who are not familiar with the organization. Question 3, what are some best practices they learned in this process? The organizations were the only ones to respond to this question, and they said that regular site visits and check-ins with participants are helpful, and most helpful is tying case management visits into assisting with basic needs can be a good practice to build and strengthen relationships. So what we found is that a lot of the organizations were to build rapport with clients would provide sort of an offering during a site visit. So maybe they know this client needs diapers or needs food or needs something. So when they go to visit the client for the check-in, they may take a care package or some other, maybe the client has requested something specific that is within the organization's ability to do. And they will take that as they talk to the client and check in, and that building that rapport allows for the client to feel more comfortable opening up about what they need and also about the progress they're making. And then establishing trust and rapport with participants takes time, but it is the foundation of a successful case manager participant relationship. And being present regularly, supporting the participants' development of independent living skills, and prompt responses to the participants' requests for assistance is key. And I think those of us that went to the Housing for New Hope breakfast the other day, we heard a really powerful testimony from one of their clients that suggests that this information is very true. The care and concern that he has been shown has helped him to thrive and live independently in the long term. So, is everybody good so far? I just have a couple more slides left. Perfect. For question 4, what about the Housing First evaluation process worked? The evaluators thought that it was great to provide the tool and to project and organizational staff ahead of time, and that the tool provided straightforward, objective questions leading to a thorough evaluation of the Housing First approach. The organizations enjoyed the idea that multiple levels of staff participated in the evaluation, and some projects even included participants to be part of the evaluation process, which really helped the evaluators to have a thorough understanding of the services and the experience of the clients that were provided by some projects. And then having these debriefing feedback sessions was helpful. So the organizations enjoyed the feedback sessions because it also helped to strengthen sense of collaboration between them. Both evaluators and organizations enjoyed the overall process, the site visit, and meeting with the project staff. They thought that was very helpful to the process and also the training session. And last but not least, the question 5, what about this process needs to be improved in the future? So this is probably my favorite one because this is where I get to do some work about it and make it better. Some of the tools questions were a little bit confusing. For example, I think there were 2 number 29s and 2 number 32s, and one of the number 29s was scored, but the other one wasn't scored, and it got a little confusing. So we're going to be fixing those things. And then, you know, we heard from one of the organizations that formal agreements appeared to hold more weight or score higher than informal agreements, which in a smaller COC like Durham could be just as effective as connecting participants to services. So we're going to be looking at that. The organizations also felt that more education of project and organizational staff and evaluators before the process began could be helpful, and more clarity about the process would be helpful. Did I just repeat myself? I think I just repeated myself. So yeah, more clarity apparently. And then both evaluators and organizations reported that some of the questions conflict with each other and need additional clarity. For example, more points are awarded if meetings with case managers are not mandatory, but also more points are awarded for more frequent interactions between case managers and participants. So it got a little bit weird because the meetings can't be mandatory, which is a higher level of scoring, but also the more frequent interactions you have, the higher the score is on that question. So it's kind of like, well, if we want to maximize scores, we should require people to come, but that actually works against the process. So we'll be looking through those questions as we move on. We won't do this evaluation again until, of course, next spring. So we have a little bit of time to clean up some of that and start the process, I think, a bit earlier in the future. So, any questions about these details? Perfect. So I think what we looked at, back
Anthony,
here. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry to interrupt you. I have a quick question.
Sure.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. This was the first time we conducted this evaluation, or had we done this before?
So great question. I believe this is the second year that we did it. Last year we did it as a cross COC sort of collaborative look at what's happening in Housing First across the 2 or 3 continuums. This year, we focused only on our own continuum. So we took the learnings from last year and just said, hey, we need to know what's happening in Durham. And so we did it in Durham this year.
Hmm.
Colin, is that right? Did I say that right?
Yeah, we last year we did a cross collaboration where we partnered with other jurisdictions. So we would go monitor their programs and they monitored ours in an effort to try and take out any bias or any, unintended, oh, well, I don't want to evaluate you because then you'll evaluate me bad if I evaluate you bad. So our goal was to try and get outside groups, and also as an opportunity for each of us to learn what each other is doing and doing well or not doing well to improve across the 3-county area. So this year, that was a massive undertaking and a lot of work, and sort of
Yeah.
thought that this year we would just do it internally and take what we learned from that, as Anthony said, to get the information done and get it done in a timely manner and see how it all shook out. And talking about maybe doing the cross jurisdictional like every few years versus annually, just because the time and coordination it takes.
Sure, that makes sense. And after looking at this evaluation and this tool, I'm also just curious, like, is this the tool that's being recommended to be continued to use? I heard like some possibilities of like there's small tweaks that can be made, but I'm curious if there are like because of the experiences we've had, other recommendations around tools that maybe would fit the process better or support like more clear opportunities to uplift what's going well and also like point out where we can continue to improve. Just curious.
Yeah, I think the tool that we used that Lloyd adapted from was originally pretty old, like it's over 10 years old, right? And so he did some adaptations that make it nice, but there are tools that are far more recent that are even available on the HUD website. There's a Housing First Evaluation template that asks the questions differently. Do you say it? Do you do it? And do you demonstrate it? I'm sorry, do you say it? Do you document it? And do you do it? They give a lot of different areas, somewhat the way we did, but it's a much simpler, I think, tool that is also more easily scored. So I think it's worth looking at that tool to see if we want to just kind of tweak and fix the tool we're using, or maybe move to the HUD template. I believe I heard from one of the organizations that we used to use the template and that it was, they thought a better option. So it's something for us to look at going forward when we come back from break. And I also, when I'm doing these things, I like to look at, what's similar COCs doing, what are larger COCs doing, and what are smaller COCs doing. So I typically will look at 2 or 3 comparables and then 1 larger and 1 smaller to see if we can kind of innovate ourselves at the best place for this. So
That's great, Anthony.
Looks-
Thanks for sharing.
sure. Thanks.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Looks good. We have a hand up from Russ.
Mhm.
You have a question?
You're muted, Russ.
It's all your dreams come true. Russ is finally muted. That was a little too quick on the laughter, Anthony. But anyway, no, I appreciate this is a great presentation. And I feel like over the last 5 years or so of my experience with this, we've come a long way in terms of, I mean, even just you're hearing the feedback from the agencies is really valuable in the way you've integrated today. And I guess my question is just, do we have ways going forward to, I feel like to some extent, we need to make sure we have whatever the tool is going to be available at least 9 months in advance, or have something that's very consistent, because I feel like we've been in the learning process, kind of getting these pieces going. Having the cross COC piece was good last year, but when you're asking, if the overall question is how are we doing on housing first, but the evaluation criteria shifts a good bit every year, it's hard to like trace it, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And really see where you're making progress or not. So I'm just wondering again how that will feed in the future of like us getting to some more set baseline, if that makes sense, and not doing quite as much tweaking year to year.
Yeah, I love those thoughts. And certainly it's on my radar to make sure that by the fall, probably post collaborative application, right? That we have a tool that we feel comfortable with, and maybe we just set a goal for ourselves, by the end of October or early November, that we decide and issue the tool that we'll use for the coming year. Since it doesn't happen until the spring, that will give a good heads up. But also, I think, even if we switch tools, Russ, I think that this tool gives a really good variety and baseline of questions that you can get guidance and know where to go. So if you just did what was on this tool to score high, no matter what tool we use, you're going to score high. But I think the moving to the other tool for me is more about, is it still thorough, but easier to score and doesn't lend itself to the kind of human error and challenges of us manually creating one that has 2 question 29s and 2 question 32s and all that kind of stuff, right? So is it easier to review, easier to score, but as thorough? And if so, then let's do that one. But the information is going to kind of be the same. The goals are going to kind of be the same for both evaluations. Thank you.
On a side note, HUD has published a housing first tool on their site that could be used by anybody. And in theory, if just following that tool should line up with whatever we do, because whatever
Right.
we do will be based on what HUD's guidance is. And the tweaking would be if there's certain things that providers in Durham or the community in Durham say, hey, you know what? HUD wants us to do ABC, but we think D, E, and F are also important. Like HUD may not care if I'm making something up. Is there a friendly face to greet somebody when they knock on the door? Well, HUD may just be saying, we want to make sure the highest, and there aren't extra barriers put in place. But we at Durham say, everybody deserves to be greeted with a warm smile and respect. And that's going to be part of our hospitality assessment in Durham, which could be a tweak. But at the end of the day, that doesn't make you housing first or not housing first. It's more of are you a hospitable service provider?
Mhm. Okay, are there any more questions? That's a great presentation, Anthony.
Thank you.
Do we now have a quorum? We want to go back and pick up the minutes if we can. Approval?
We still don't have a quorum.
Oh, okay. Well, in that case, Anthony, I believe you have another section presentation for us.
Okay. I can't see both the screen and the presentation. Which one am I doing now? Is this the ESG timeline?
Scoring and ranking of
perfect.
upcoming
Okay.
applications.
Yes. So this is again more informational. I kind of want to talk about where we are. I'm having to, did I stop sharing my screen? Perfect. I'm having
Yes,
to
you do.
pull up an email. Give me 1 second. Perfect. So I wanted to talk about the scoring and ranking of upcoming applications, and also talk about the need for volunteers. Again, it's that time of year who don't have a conflict, with any of the providers that can help score applications. I'll talk a little bit about both, and tell you where we are in it, and then we'll come back and see if we can get some folks to volunteer. The ESG application process was released by the state of North Carolina 2 days ago on June 11th. It included all of the attachments, applications, checklists, application packets, budget worksheets, and everything necessary for successful submissions. So we are sending that out. I drafted and sent for Collins review yesterday, or last night, a message to go out to the Durham COC that loops the COC into the state ESG process, and will give our current and any new members of the COC the opportunity to start to engage the application process. Although the information just came out, the first webinar about it is tomorrow. So we're going to be releasing this information today. There are 3 webinars though. So if anybody gets the information today and can't be tomorrow, there are 2 others coming up shortly. And so again, we're going to send out an email on the state ESG application process today. I'm also going to show you in just a moment the timeline that I've developed for us to engage that process and make sure that this committee is okay with it. And then the scorecard, again, much like Housing First and the other performance evaluations that we did, the scorecard needs some work. Sometimes we develop scorecards that match the application process, and then the application process changes. So what was section 2 last time might be section 3 this time, or maybe there was a section 5 last time that doesn't exist this time. So because this just came out, it's going to take us a minute to reconcile the scorecard with the application. So that will be revised and released, and I'm hoping to release that by the end of the Q&A period for this particular process, so that the applicants will have it in enough time to understand what will help their applications be stronger. So let me go to that scorecard here. I'm sorry, not scorecard, timeline. Can everybody see it? Perfect, okay. So I'm just gonna do a very quick walkthrough. This is based on what happened last year with updated dates, and hopefully gives a little more grace in the application period, a little less grace in the review period, and a little more grace in the appeals period. So by Friday, which is next week, the 21st, applicants will have to submit questions about this competition by then. And then we give ourselves a week to answer those questions, and we will at that time, which is after the HSAC meeting, announce the approved use of funds. So in this particular case, we have to decide each year, based on how much we're getting, what goes into what pot. So in this case, we're getting 170,000. HUD says that no more than 60% can be used for emergency services, and no less than 40% can be used for whatever the other category is. So we have to think about, do we want to do 60-40, 50-50, 30-70, or whatever? We can use it. The other category is housing stability. We can do it all in housing stability, or we can do, some portion of it in emergency services, based on what policy and planning and HSAC decide should be the priority, right? So that will come out also when at the end of the Q&A period, we'll talk about where HSAC says the money, is gonna go. Then about 3 weeks later is when the applications from the projects are due in the state smart sheet. So, they have not released the smart sheet yet for submissions, but that will happen, I guess, any day now. And once it does, applicants will be able to start to populate that with their projects. Their deadline is gonna be July 19th because we still have other, this works a lot like the COC application where projects come first and then we put together the collaborative application and submit it on behalf of the entire COC. So, by August 2nd, which is a Friday, the evaluation committee or subcommittee, sorry, which will be the people that volunteer for the scoring, will make funding recommendations to the performance management committee. That following week, the performance management committee will advance those recommendations to HSAC for anticipation that at the August 14th HSAC meeting, those funding recommendations can be approved. The following day, we will send those approvals. We will send the state's required participation agreement. Oh my gosh, look how I spelled agreement. We will send the state's required participation agreement to the organizations that have been approved by funding. But at that point, we are in an appeals period. So if there's anybody that feels like something about the funding approvals didn't make sense or is unfair or left somebody out that should have been in, whatever that looks like, they get to appeal. And by August 19th, they will appeal. And that process looks like they put an appeal on letterhead that explains the reason why they believe the funding recommendation should be reconsidered. And then we will send out a note to HSAC to finalize the funding recommendations after considering the appeals. So that will occur by August 22nd. And then by Monday, August 26th at 5 p.m., the application is due from us within the state smart sheet. So that is the very aggressive timeline for this process. This is normal though. It happens this year. This timeline is following along last year's, like I said, with a little more grace, I thought, in some important areas. So hopefully this makes sense to you all, and we will engage this process. It's sort of already underway. After this meeting, we will release the email to the COC. Any questions about this timeline? Perfect. So that takes care of the ESG application process. And like I said, the scorecard is being revised and we'll release that also, hopefully by the end of the Q&A period. I'm gonna move now to the COC application process. We typically get the NOFO, sometime in early July. And that has not, or end of June, early July, it has not come yet. So the timeline for that and the scorecard are under development. We initially had a timeline for a pre-application process, but given all of the things that are happening, we will probably have to incorporate new and renewal applicants along the same schedule, with new applications going out maybe a week or two early. Versus trying to do an entire pre-application process and then the renewal process. So more to come on those things. And I think that will conclude that part of it. And do we have anybody on this committee without a conflict who would be willing to join us in scoring? I can just tell you, the 2023 scorers for the ESG process were Jonathan, Renee, Tracy, and our very own staff person, Melissa. And the COC scoring reviewers were Jonathan, Renee, Danielle, and myself. So we are happy to engage those that have participated before. And also hope that some new folks would also be willing to participate if there's no conflict of interest. So I guess I will ask, in this audience, and we will go out beyond this audience to the COC membership to see who else might be willing to support. But is there anybody on the call today who would be willing to review applications in this process?
Could you say a little more, Anthony, about time commitment? I may have missed that, but just understanding those pieces.
Yeah, so they are a little bit different, I will say, and Colin may have to back me up because I wasn't here during this time last year. I believe we only had 2 applications for ESG last year. And one was a new group and one was an existing group. And ironically, the new group didn't demonstrate the capacity. So really only 1 application was considered, which was really a lucky thing. So if that is the way it goes, then we'll probably have fewer applications for ESG. And for COC, I believe we looked at anywhere from 7 to 9 applications total. That process took a long time because the tool had not been automated. I'm hoping that having automated that tool with NCCEH earlier this year, that will significantly reduce the time it takes to review applications. The idea is that the lead agency will determine whether or not an application meets the threshold requirement so that the reviewers can focus on the quality and content of the project that they're applying for. Right? So and instead of having reviewers focus on, does this applicant meet the threshold, you won't even see applicants that don't meet the threshold. And the threshold has a lot to do with, do they have audits? Have they submitted everything? Was it on time? Are they a legitimate 501c3 or local government agency? We go through all that checklist before we will have the reviewers come in. So I expect fewer numbers of applications for ESG and probably more for COC. But hopefully the time commitment per application could be maybe 1 to 2 hours for a good review. It took a lot longer last year, Renee, I know, right? But we have automated that tool, so it should balance a little bit. So, yeah, I hope that's helpful, Eliza. I don't want to discourage new folks from taking this on because I feel like it's going to be a much better process this year. And we do want the reviewers to give a really good focus on the actual project and how it's meeting the need in the COC.
Yep.
So that will be the time that the evaluators are expected to spend looking at the applications.
Yep, that was super helpful. I am interested. I think that's helpful. And I'm still just curious about my schedule and the timeline of committing to something beyond the ESG, which sounds like a lighter commitment, but you can put me down as interested. And when there's an all call to everybody, I can hear that again.
Anthony put me down as well.
Thank you.
We will try it
Is that
again.
for both, Renee, or just for ESG or COC?
Both.
Last year you did both. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll try that again.
All right, and Eliza, am I putting you down for both as well? I know you got a question about
Put
it.
me in for ESG and then
Okay.
put me in for a maybe for the larger. I think I just need to see how that falls on my calendar with what other things I've got going on.
Perfect.
If we have there's about a dozen COC renewals. And if we have enough scores, everybody doesn't have to review all dozen. We can break them out and make it easier, but it comes down to how many people are reviewing. And you need at least 2 or 3 people reviewing
Right.
each one,
Right.
so more hands make light work.
Hi, Anthony, this is Vega. Down as well. I did have a similar concern, like Eliza, in terms of the time frame and I guess the commitment with my calendar, but let me just take a stab at it, see what happens.
Okay, very good. And I promise to work with you all to do as much of the heavy lifting as possible and allowing you all to focus, like I said, on the content of the project itself.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Thank
That's
you.
great.
Having an automated smart sheet will be tremendous.
Yeah, that tool that took us forever last year, we just couldn't do it. And we do know that there are some tweaks that need to be made to that, but we have the time to do those, before the scoring process kicks in. So we're good. Thank you. So I have Renee, Eliza, and Vega down for ESG, and then Renee and Vega down for COC with Eliza as a maybe. And we will go after a few more reviewers, especially for COC, just so that we make sure we have enough. And if we could have, each group of reviewers for COC reviewing 2 to 3 applications, I think it would make, again, the process a lot easier for everybody. So, thank you, thank you. Madam Chair, I think that's it for me. I think, if nobody else,
Russ, yeah. Russ, you're on mute.
Okay, sorry. Just a quick question related to ESG. I'm just curious, are there any efforts, and it's probably too late to start now if there's not, but even for next year to recruit more potential applicants? I feel like on ESG, because it is so challenging, that there's a lot of hesitation from groups. I mean, we joke often, but it is true. If you don't do any work for a month, you still have 70 pages to submit. Literally a 70-page requisition for nothing. So I'm just curious, because it seems like at times we have a lot of lining up for the easier the paperwork gets, so to speak, the more people want to line up. So it puts the pressure on just a few agencies to step in at times and do this. And it's not been unusual for the city to ask a few of us to step in and take more than we thought would be appropriate to sort of make it work, for the city to get its full allocation.
In terms of a concerted effort, we've not gone out and done that type of TA yet, but last year, historically, we've had more than 2 people applying for funds. And there's also been other agencies that have said, oh, well, we're not going to apply for it because those funds are already kind of allocated to people and we don't want to compete and take money away from one of our partner agencies. So there's kind of, I don't want to say it's collusion because it's not collusion. It's more of a professional respect that it's like, oh, well, this is money that agency ABC relies on for funding, and I don't want to go compete with it and take it from them because then that's going to cause them a problem. I haven't gotten it before, so I'm not going to apply for it. I think we need to sort of get back to, okay, compete for money. Last year, the state ESG money was split 50-50 between the emergency response and permanent stability stuff. And the way it shook out was the family numbers of unsheltered families was jumping up. And last year, the state money was prioritized for street outreach to families with 50% of the funds, and was prioritized for rapid rehousing for homeless families with the other 50% of the funds. So both the only agency who met threshold and applied for the money was Housing for New Hope. So Housing for New Hope has all of the state ESG funds. In previous years, Families Moving Forward had applied for money for emergency shelter. Urban Ministries has never applied for funds. Open Tables never applied for state. Project Access has never applied for state funds that I'm aware of. So it's historically been about 2 to 3 people applying for the funds on a regular basis.
Can I ask, Sally put a, question in the chat about which projects were eligible.
Colin just answered that. Yeah.
Okay,
So
perfect.
all prioritized for families last year is the
That was
message.
that was the priority, but it didn't, and I was just pulling the data for rapid rehousing. And with that state grant Housing for New Hope, it's prioritized for housing, but if there isn't a family ready to go and there's an opening, singles could be taken. So it looks like there were 6 households served so far in the first 6 months with rapid rehousing. And it looks like 4 were families and 2 were singles. Or yeah, because there were 6 adults over 18, and then there were 2 adults without kids in the program.
Yeah,
And then
and
State
I would,
Outreach has had 17 households served.
yeah, and it may be worth some, so I do know I will correct one thing, Colin. Open Table has applied a couple of times and did receive money previously.
Oh, on the state? That's
With
right,
some couple
yes.
state. So I say that just to say, it may be worth at some point, again, I don't think we're gonna pull it off this summer, talking to some of the groups that have had it before to get their feedback on it, because I know, part of last year to me was a complete anomaly, but going back to the 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I mean, one of the pieces was there was like a level of clarity from planning and policy about how they wanted things distributed, but then just regardless of who scored the highest, they would try and split it out among several groups, and then no one's getting enough to justify all the paperwork, if that makes sense. So I mean, I know some of the, I'm part of me is trying to hint at, like, we do need to be thinking about this, because we are going to, as an agency, are obviously thinking through, is this worth all the paperwork at times? I mean, there's path money sitting out there that none of us go get because it's so difficult and it's not worth it. And I think just having some sessions moving forward of understanding why people aren't doing it, and now that your TA capacity is growing in such a good way, it may be helpful just to make sure we do have people applying and pulling on it. So,
Yeah.
for the community.
And what I'm hearing, Russ, is where the scoring committee was really doing its best to try and give people something. I'm hearing from you, at least from your perspective, is that actually over time pushes people away from doing it, because getting $25,000 or $50,000 is great, but it's the state's paperwork requirement for a monthly invoice doesn't justify the headache for that little amount.
Yes, I mean, there was a situation a couple of years ago where it was like divided out with like 2 or 3 groups each getting like $20,000 to do street outreach, and it isn't worth. I say, please don't mishear me saying that. It's not that people don't want to do the work. It's just not a viable amount. It's almost a nonsensical amount of work for $20,000 or $25,000
So
if you've got other sources.
Okay, what would be helpful to hear then is, from your perspective, is there kind of like a floor? Like sometimes funding is put out and say grants will be no less than or no more than. Obviously, your no more than would be whatever the cap is in each category, but we don't want to do a $10,000 grant or a $20,000. Like, what is kind of that threshold of where does it make it? Where's that tipping point where it makes it worth doing?
So I think so I would say having a conversation with a couple of partners, even if it's just a quick one together, would probably be a good one, because my threshold is probably different for capacity reasons, but especially when we're wanting to invite and see more smaller or newer organizations, getting a sense of what their threshold need is maybe even more important than what we would be
Okay.
thinking in terms of threshold.
Okay. We
I'm
can
not
pull
trying
that.
to not answer. I want to, just based on the chitter chat I've heard from some of those smaller agencies, I think giving them that chance to give their feedback would be
Sure.
great.
Well,
Because I
I
think
was
there's
like-
interest, but it's just the paperwork's such a nightmare.
Yeah, no, I plan to kind of survey folks, and I appreciate you wanting to hold off on an opinion at this point. But we'll definitely do a survey and get the group together and kind of talk it through. Just to get some feedback.
Right.
We don't have any control over what the state requires for reimbursements, unfortunately.
No, I know. And apparently we have one of the resident experts, and she did a presentation at the state on it last week. So
Mhm.
So how many people are you thinking of reaching out to, Colin? Groups?
I mean, we'll send it out to the executive directors of the COC member agencies, and whoever shows up, shows up. I mean, we'll definitely make sure that the people who have received funding in the past, or who have applied for COC funding, but I think in order to offer as much equity as we can, we want to send it out to the full COC that we're doing a listening session about ESG, state ESG. And please send executive directors or finance folks who are the ones who compete or who do a lot of the grant administration to that meeting, just to kind of have a roundtable and hear what folks are thinking. I
And
don't
this
want
will be
to
a public
exclude
announcement
anybody.
and a public announcement as well. You generally do that as the,
Yeah, we'll definitely
of course.
do. That's what Anthony sent me last night, was the announcement about this grant, because we do need to get it out, because there are some training, some opening Q&A and how to apply workshops the state is doing this week and next week and things like that. So we need to get that out the door to the full COC. People who are currently funded, I imagine, Russ, you guys have already gotten that, because anybody can sign up for the Health and Human Services mailing list and will get that when it's released. So we, as the collaborative applicant, will be sending it out.
yeah, I think any of us on the list get it at the same time that the city does.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So we'll send it out, and then we'll also have to work with the department to get it sent out, beyond the COC list. However, the only people who are really eligible to apply for the funds are COC members.
All right. Well, if there are no more comments or questions, did we ever reach a quorum? Oh, no quorum. Okay. Well, Anthony, I guess you're up again.
Sorry, is this the unspent funds part?
Yes, unspent funds conversation revisited.
Yes, Colin's gonna take care of that.
Okay.
So in the last meeting, if I recall correctly, there was a discussion about one of the agencies had a significant amount of unspent funding. And we have been working and providing technical assistance to that organization about the unspent funding. And we met with the organization yesterday. Well, we've been talking, not just yesterday, but we've been talking for a long, long period of time. And they were supposed to make some decisions on future funding and applying, and what the next steps would be, because there are concerns about having a year and a half of money not drawn down, because HUD sees that as, oh, thank you, Durham, for doing all this great work. You don't need the money, so we'll take it somewhere else because you can clearly do it for free, which is not the case. The organization had some technical challenges in being able to get into the lock system due to organizational change, and they're working through that with HUD and with us to be able to get it corrected. HUD is coming out to do a monitoring of their program in September. When I met with the organization yesterday, they did agree that they would not apply for, they said no, they're capacity wise, they need to not apply for funds in 2024. So they said, no, go ahead and reallocate the 2024 competition money So there will be roughly $300,000. I think is what I wrote down as their current grant amount being reallocated for the $302,867 is the award for this year. So we will reallocate those funds, and anybody can apply for those funds. The Policy and Planning Committee is making a recommendation that the HSAC will need to approve in June as to whether or to the priority for reallocated funds and bonus projects. So when funds are reallocated, that means those funds can be applied for anything like rapid rehousing, permanent supportive housing, homeless management information system, a supportive services only project. Policy and Planning will has made a recommendation, and HSAC will vote on that and decide whether or not the agents, which program, is it permanent supportive housing, rapid rehousing, supportive services, or homeless management information system, that will be the priority for anybody seeking those reallocations. And that's the LGBTQ Center has elected not to apply for a renewal grant this year.
And just-
It'll be their
just to follow up,
funding. We will be
just-
working to ensure that those clients who are in their program that are eligible for services when their grant ends in 2025, that the folks in their programs don't fall off the proverbial cliff. We'll make sure that they get transitioned if they're eligible for other programs. And we will also be working closely with the LGBTQ Center and whatever project it gets reallocated to ensure that members of the LGBTQ community who are experiencing homelessness have access to those programs as well with a culturally competent staffing.
And just a follow-up question, Colin, I didn't recall that you had this information at the Policy and Planning meeting on Monday. Did I miss that, or is this new information since then?
Have what information?
That the LGBTQ Center is not reapplying, and so their funds need to be reallocated.
I did not have that information at the Policy and Planning meeting because I was not able to get a meeting with their executive director until yesterday. We had been hoping to have it all worked out by May.
It just occurs to me that that might be that the Policy and Planning made a recommendation to go forward to HSAC based on, without this information, and that might be helpful for people to know for discussion.
Policy and Planning's recommendation was based on if money is reallocated, what would they want to do with it? And what would the bonus projects be? And what would the DV bonus project prioritization look like? So
Yeah,
I didn't know if there would be money or not money.
Yeah.
And it was sort of because whether they voluntarily did it, if LGBTQ Center did not voluntarily do it, then this committee would have had to have a conversation starting today about what are the next steps. Would we, ask them? Would we force them? Would we take a part of the money? Would we take all of it? There's a whole lot of other pieces that couldn't have been done until after this meeting anyway. And there wouldn't have been enough time because Policy and Planning doesn't meet again until August. And most of these projects would be due by the end of September. And we want to make sure we've got enough time to get folks thinking about if they're going to apply for reallocated funds, there's time for them to start thinking about it now.
Okay. All right. Anthony, I know you have another meeting. I have another meeting. Are there any other questions or comments on this item? Looks like we do, hearing none. Looks like we do not have a quorum still. So if there's no further business, I believe there's no performance management subcommittee meeting in July. Our next meeting will be in August. Is there anything else?
Just so you know, the May and the June meetings minutes will have to be approved in August.
Okay, thank you so much. All right, everybody. If all minds and
Mhm.
hearts are clear, we are adjourned.
Y'all have a great day.
We need a motion to adjourn.
We need a motion to adjourn? Okay. Do I have one?
I'll make a motion to adjourn. This is Eliza.
This is Vega. I'll second that, please.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a
Great
good
job,
one.
Renee.
Mhm.